Just one day after marrying into an ultra-wealthy family, all 13 members of the household exploded. Meanwhile, Grace, who was supposed to inherit a multi-billion-dollar fortune, set fire to the century-old mansion instead. Facing police questioning, she simply uttered a single line with casual indifference.
Jesus Christ, what happened to you?
In-laws.
So, let us dive into this movie. Ready or not? Grace lost both of her parents at a young age and worked multiple jobs for years to support herself. That is, until a chance encounter with an ultra-wealthy heir who fell hopelessly in love with her. In just 1 year, they overcame numerous obstacles and walked down the aisle. Yet even so, almost everyone in the wealthy family harbored resentment toward her.
She's pretty enough. I'll last call it the dive bar kind of way. But she'll never be one of us.
Of course not, dear. She has a soul.
Fortunately, her mother-in-law, who also came from a humble background, did not mistreat her. She encouraged Grace to face life bravely, ignore the prejudices of others, and focus only on her own happiness.
Stand tall and fuck 'em. The only thing that matters is what Alex thinks. And that we know.
But is that really how things were? After the wedding, it should have been a warm, intimate moment for the newlyweds. However, Aunt Helene suddenly slipped into the room through a hidden door. She stated she was only there to remind them it was game time. Only then did Grace learn of a century-old Ladomas family tradition. Every time a new member is welcomed, they must draw a card to play a game on their wedding night. The games corresponding to the cards could be ordinary activities like backgammon, baseball, or checkers. But Alex never told her that hidden among the cards was a deadly option: hide and seek. Completely unaware of the danger lurking behind the game and wanting to please her husband's family, Grace reluctantly agreed to participate.
Do you like to play games?
I guess it depends on what we're playing.
Well, we'll know in a moment. I gather you've noticed our family is big on tradition. And now the time has come for you to join us in those traditions. Our initiate then has the privilege of drawing the card, and Mr. LaBelle will tell us which game to play.
But no one expected that Grace would draw hide and seek. It had been exactly 30 years since anyone last drew that card. Back then, the man who married into the family paid for it with his life. When the Ladomas family saw the card, they were completely stunned. This meant they had to personally kill Alex's newlywed wife. Unaware of the approaching danger, Grace assumed it was just a regular game of hide and seek. Alex's father, Tony Ladomas, told Grace she could hide in any corner of the mansion until she was found. To ensure fairness, they would turn off all security cameras in the estate, and everyone had to follow the rules left behind from their great-grandfather's era. If they failed to catch Grace before dawn, she would win. Having understood the rules, Grace immediately ran upstairs to face the challenge. What she did not know was that Tony immediately played a creepy tune and led the family to choose their weapons. The rules had restrictions too. They could only use vintage weapons handed down from their great-grandfather. While they were choosing their weapons, let us look at why the Ladomas family had to carry out this hunt. Generations ago, the Ladomas ancestor made a deal with a demon. The demon helped them rise to become an elite dynasty, but the price was that every new family member had to participate in the card-drawing game. If anyone drew a high-stakes game, they had to complete it. Otherwise, the demon would reclaim all of the family's assets. As Grace hid in the dumbwaiter, the Ladomas family armed themselves and set out. Only Alex was filled with anguish. He could not bear the thought of his newlywed wife being hunted down by his family on their wedding night. Before this, he had approached his father to voice his thoughts.
So, how much have you told her?
Nothing. And I never will. Tomorrow we're gone.
After hesitating for a moment, he slipped into a secret passage to find Grace. Meanwhile, Grace got out of the dumbwaiter and hid in their bridal suite. Facing Grace's complete confusion, Alex comforted her in whispers while hiding her. Just then, a maid suddenly pushed the door open. She had no idea of the life or death crisis at hand.
George?
It turned out Emily, too worked up, mistook her for Grace and shot her. When Tony arrived, he did not blame his daughter. Instead, he stated that the ritual had a strict requirement. They could only injure Grace. She had to be alive for the sacrifice. By this time, Grace was shaking with fear, covering her mouth tightly to avoid making a sound. In this moment, she finally realized that she had not married into wealth and luxury, but had stepped onto a path to certain death. Fortunately, Alex still possessed a conscience. He had never believed his father's demonic legends. So, he quietly led Grace to hide in the estate's secret passages. With all the doors in the house locked, Alex planned for Grace to follow the passage to the kitchen, while he went back to the control room to unlock the doors. Terrified as she was, this was the only way to escape.
When you marry into this family, you have to play a game. And if you don't, you die. I know that sounds crazy, but you have to believe me. It is real.
You didn't even fucking talk to me. You could have told me. We could have just...
If I told you, you would have left. If I didn't propose, you would have left. You're everything to me, and I promise you I'm gonna get you out of here, okay?
Grace tore off the cumbersome hem of her wedding dress to prevent the fabric from slowing her down. Reaching the end of the secret passage, she was confronted by 2 doors. Choosing one at random, she opened it only to stumble upon the Le Domas family moving the maid's corpse. She turned to flee and ran into Emily. Narrowly escaping, Grace hid in another room. Before Grace could catch her breath, Daniel walked in holding a gun. Instead of hurting her, he gave her 10 seconds to run before he would alert the family. Left with no choice, Grace kept running. When the rest of the family reached the room, they found only Daniel drinking alone. As they bickered, Emily suddenly realized her gun was missing. Seeing this, Fitch handed his crossbow to Emily. However, Emily accidentally shot and killed another maid. Instead of blaming her, the family comforted her, telling her not to be discouraged. Maybe she would hit the target next time. As they discussed their next move, the maid let out a faint groan. Aunt Helene swung an axe and finished her off. As dawn drew closer, they had to kill the bride before sunrise. With time running out, the family decided to turn the security cameras back on and even planned to use modern firearms. They argued that the rules only restricted weapons that did not exist in their great-grandfather's era, but did not explicitly forbid modern firearms. Meanwhile, on the run, Grace found a gun and immediately armed herself. Just as she was about to smash the kitchen door lock, Stevens walked in slowly, whistling. Grace crouched down, using the sound of Stevens singing aloud to successfully chamber a round. At the same time, Alex managed to unlock all the doors. It was now or never. Seeing Stevens approaching the door, Grace snuck up behind him. Stevens realized the gun she had was only a display piece. Grace grabbed a boiling kettle and slammed it hard against Stevens' head. Wounded and in pain, Stevens still refused to let her go and lunged at her with a kitchen knife. In the security room, a fierce conflict broke out between the family and Alex.
That's my wife!
Hey, Alex. Alex, you don't have to do this. Alex.
Okay.
Ultimately, to protect the family, Tony knocked Alex unconscious.
Damn it.
Grace escaped back to the hallway, intending to hide in the dumbwaiter again, but a maid was already hiding inside. The maid screamed for the family, wanting to end the game as quickly as possible. As she pressed the elevator button, she ended up getting crushed to death by the dumbwaiter. With her escape route cut off once more, Grace had to find another way out. Taking advantage of a moment when no one was watching, she climbed out of a window and leaped down from the 2nd floor. Grace ran desperately toward the perimeter of the estate, accidentally stumbling into the goat pen. Just as she tried to catch her breath, a young boy walked in. Georgie was Emily and Fitch's son. Grace tried to gently soothe him, but Georgie shot her straight through the hand. As she picked up her flashlight, a goat suddenly charged, causing Grace to fall heavily through the cellar doors. Once she came to, she realized the pit was filled with human bones. This was the final resting place of those who had refused to play the game or had failed it in previous years. Terrified, Grace immediately began climbing up an old ladder. Because the ladder was so decayed, it collapsed just as she was nearing the exit. Gritting her teeth against the agonizing pain in her pierced hand, she clung to a protruding nail and managed to pull herself back to the surface. She ran toward the edge of the estate again, only to be spotted by Emily, who was holding a crossbow. With terrible aim, Emily could only watch as Grace disappeared into the dark. Grace rushed all the way to the estate's iron fence and squeezed through the gaps. But before she could get far, Stevens pursued her in a car. He quickly tracked her down and caught up with her. Driven by a desperate will to live, Grace unleashed immense strength. After a long struggle, she managed to knock Stevens unconscious and drove away in his car. Unbeknownst to her, Stevens had reported the vehicle stolen, which remotely disabled the car. Grace could neither drive away nor unlock the doors to escape. Stevens caught up with the vehicle again.
Daniel, you don't want to kill me. You don't want me to die.
No, I don't. I like you, Grace.
So let me go. Okay.
I'm weak.
You're a good guy. You're a really, really, really good guy. And Alex loves you. And you love him. He's not gonna forgive you if you do this.
Maybe not, but at least he'll be alive. I can't let my entire family die because of you.
When Grace opened her eyes next, she was back inside the mansion. They bound Grace to a sacrificial table marked with a pentagram. The family passed around a mysterious potion, chanting ancient incantations to offer her to the demon. Believing her fate was sealed, Grace was ready to give up. Just as Tony raised his dagger to strike, he suddenly coughed up blood, and one by one, the rest of the family collapsed, poisoned. It turned out Daniel could not bear to see Grace killed, and had spiked the sacrificial potion with hydrochloric acid beforehand. Taking advantage of their helplessness, he quickly untied Grace and helped her escape the ritual room. Meanwhile, Alex broke free from his restraints and rushed to find Grace. Just as Grace was about to run out of the mansion's main doors, Daniel's wife Charity blocked her path with a gun. Seeing her husband betray the family for an outsider, her heart shattered, and she shot Daniel on the spot.
Thank you.
By the time Alex arrived, he only saw Daniel lying on the floor. He instinctively assumed Grace had killed his brother, and in an instant, any love between them vanished. He could not accept the death of his closest brother. As soon as Grace ran out to the courtyard, Tony blocked her path. This time, she was no longer afraid. She grabbed a nearby object, knocked Tony unconscious, and kept running. Just after escaping Tony, Alex's mother Becky suddenly appeared. Becky, who had comforted her so gently earlier, was now hell-bent on taking her life. Grace refused to back down anymore. She grabbed a metal box and bludgeoned her mother-in-law. Watching this unfold, Alex became even more convinced that Grace was a murderer. Grace knew there was no going back for them. She hoped Alex would let her go out of their past affection, but she was completely wrong. Alex switched sides, grabbing her with all his strength. Even though he still did not believe the demonic legend deep down, he cooperated with his family to pin Grace back onto the altar. The family chanted the sacrificial incantation once more, preparing to offer Grace to the demon.
It is lost. Forgive us.
Everyone closed their eyes, waiting for the demon to arrive. A few minutes passed, and nothing changed around them. They began to wonder, was the century-old legend just a lie? Aunt Helene immediately suggested that the demon was giving them one more chance, and they must finish the sacrifice.
The girl still dies!
At that moment, everyone realized the legend was absolutely real. Because they failed to complete the hunt according to the rules, they were about to face the backlash of the curse. One by one, the family members began to explode. Tony could not understand why, despite following the game rules the entire time, the demon still refused to spare his family. At this point, only Alex survived. Since Grace won the game and they were married, he also escaped the curse. But Grace had already seen right through this man.
Alex,
Yeah.
I want a divorce.
Ultimately, Grace became the sole survivor of this night-long hunt. Only then did the demon they spoke of appear as an illusion, as if congratulating her on winning the game. As the dawn broke on the horizon, the century-old mansion caught fire and burned. Grace stood quietly to the side, her heart completely untroubled. After surviving this terrifying night, she finally understood that marrying into a wealthy family is never a destination worth envying. Through an absurd and bloody mansion hunt, this film tears away the cold-blooded and selfish nature of the hypocritical elite. Grace originally longed to find a warm family through marriage, but what awaited her was being slaughtered in compliance with the family's brutal rules. The Ladomas family's wealth was built on a pact with the devil, and the price of maintaining that wealth was sacrificing innocent outsiders. Ready or Not is not just a gory, thrilling film chasing sensory stimulation. Through a black comedy that parodies a wedding, it tears away the hypocritical masks of class privilege, the institution of marriage, traditional dogma, and human selfishness in modern society. Thus, it prompts the audience to examine the brutal logic of reality amidst thrills and laughter. As the fire consumes this century-old mansion, it is like the female lead being reborn from the ashes, allowing the audience to see that the glamorous elite world is ultimately a cage that traps people, and that sincerity and freedom are the most precious things in the world.